Kalala Yahweh. Boa Shuma Moshe Yahweh. Shema Yisrael Yahweh Alahayana wa Kadabon Mashpaka. Asha Shabbat. May peace, serenity, and prosperity be multiplied unto you all. All right. So we're continuing forward here with a continuation of the Feast of Dedication lesson regarding the history behind neither Jew nor Greek, as it was stated by Brother Paul. This will be part 3 of that continuation. Now, part 1 and part 2 really gave you some historical insight on the reason Paul said this, right? Because it's widely misinterpreted that, they're actually speaking of the Greeks that we know of today. It's widely misinterpreted that Paul were speaking of those Greeks. Well, now that we got that understood and we understand the historical accuracy behind his statement as to why he said that when he was speaking to those Israelites of Corinth, Galatians, it was Galatians, yeah. When he was speaking of those Israelites in Galatians, in the city of Galatia, we're going to go furthermore into another widely misinterpreted verse from the epistles of Paul. We're going to go to that. And this particular epistle were to those Israelites of Rome, which is the epistle Romans. All right. Now, a widely misinterpreted verse is Romans chapter 11. And we're going to go to Romans chapter 11 here. And we're going to start at verse 13. Now, Romans chapter 11, verse 13, Aksha'al speaks of him being the apostle of the Gentiles and that he magnifies his office, as is stated here in verse 13. For I speak to you Gentiles, and as much as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify mine office. So the unlearned, right? The unlearned quickly think of the other nations when Paul speaks of the Gentiles. Mind you, he is not speaking of those Gentiles. Okay? Gentiles was sometimes referred to as an identifier for Israelites who no longer kept the customs of their heritage. And that's who Aksha'al is speaking of here in Romans chapter 11, verse 13. And I'll prove it. We're going to prove it with the scriptures. So what do we know about Paul? Let's think about that. So Paul was once a Pharisee, persecuting those who followed the way of Yahweh Shah HaMashiach. Then Yahweh Shah pulled up, per se, for lack of better terms. He pulled up on Paul through a spiritual revelation and commissioned Paul to preach the gospel according to Yahweh Shai. So we know that Paul was commissioned by Yahweh Shai. He commissioned him through the spiritual realm, because this was long after Yahweh Shai was crucified on the cross and rose again and went up into a chariot back to the heavenly realm. Okay? It was long before that. Or well, long after that. Salakia. So we know that Paul converted from the ways of the Pharisees into actually teaching the way, the truth, and the life through Yahweh Shai HaMashiach. Mind you, he still had the knowledge of Thorah as the Pharisees did, and he still advocated it in his epistles. You have to know the Thorah to be able to see that. If you don't know Thorah, then you don't see how Thorah was encoded in his epistles. But nonetheless, let's get to this verse here, verse 13 of chapter 11 of Romans. So yeah, people misinterpret that he's talking about all the other nations that are non-Israelites. Well, if that's the case, and we know that he was commissioned by the Messiah, he would not be going against the Messiah. Right? He wouldn't just venture off to do his own thing and speak his own doctrine. We know that, because it's been proven throughout his scriptures, or excuse me, his epistles. And I'll prove that. We're going to Matthew chapter 10 and verse 5. It reads, "These 12 Yahushua sent forth and commanded them, saying, Go not into the way of the Gentiles. Go not into the way of the Gentiles. Go not into the way of the Gentiles. And into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not." Verse 6, "But go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." So we see here when Yahushua walked the earth, when he personally, physically commissioned the disciples to go out and preach the gospel, that he specifically told them to go where the Israelites were, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. These are the Gentiles that Paul is speaking of in Romans chapter 11, verse 13. The lost sheep of the house of Israel. So when we go back to Romans 11, verse 13, that's the Gentiles he's talking about. Those Israelites that completely abandon the heritage and the ways of Abba Yahweh Ha'alahayim Al Shaddai. That's who he's talking about. Otherwise, he wouldn't be doing as what Mashiach instructed. He would be going against Yahweh's instructions if it was specifically those natural Gentiles. But it's not, as we prove there. But some may say, oh, well, that's contradictory. The Bible's contradictory in itself. Paul's a contradiction. No, you're just not well versed in the business of Yahweh. If you think that, or if you resort to that, you're actually resorting to the tactics of a demon. And we're going to prove it. So now that we know that the lost sheep of the house of Israel are the Gentiles that Paul was speaking of, how did that become? Well, we found out one way that happened with Antiochus Epiphanes on how he changed laws and called everybody by the name of Greeks, right? And those Israelites that didn't want to rebel, but they submitted to it, went ahead and dropped their customs and their heritage to be known as Greeks. We saw one example of that, but guess what? That happened also way before the time of an Antiochus Epiphanes. You had Israelites dropping their heritage and no longer following the law, statutes, and commandments to pick up the ways of the nations that were among them. Yeah, let's prove it. Let's prove it. We're going to go to 2 Kings chapter 17, 13. We're going to start here. 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 13. Yet Yahweh testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, saying, turn ye from your evil ways, and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants, the prophets. Okay, continuing forward here, verse 14. Notwithstanding, they would not hear, but hardened their necks, like to the neck of their fathers, that did not believe in Yahweh their Elohim. Verse 15. Verse 15. And they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies, which he testified against them. And they followed vanity and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them, concerning whom Yahweh had charged them that they should not do like them. Yeah, so there you have it. And this was way before. This was hundreds, maybe a few thousand years before Antiochus Epiphanes. Yeah, this is a very long time ago before Antiochus Epiphanes. You had Israelites still doing that way before then. Not hearkening to the law, statutes, and commandments, but yet adopting the ways, the traditions, and the cultures of the other nations that they were scattered abroad to. Yeah, I'm gonna prove that. Don't worry about it. We're gonna get that too. I'm gonna go to Deuteronomy 28 and verse 15. But if it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of Yahweh the Elohim, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. That's Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 15. So the fact that you still have Israelites who don't claim to be of Israel, still following the ways and the heathen customs of today, that is indeed a curse. That is the result of a curse of not following the Most High God as his chosen people. So we see that curse until this, even until this very day. You can just walk outside and stumble upon witnessing that curse. Wait, there's more. There's more. There's more in this interpretation here. Let's go to verse 25. Verse 25, right here. The Lord shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them, and shall be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. So that happened already. That happened. And a prime example of that was slavery. Yeah, slavery. One of the 2 biggest examples of that was the transatlantic slave trade and the sub-Saharan slave trade, and what's now quoted as the quote-unquote Middle East. Yeah, that was a result of Deuteronomy 28:25. Now, mind you, Yahweh scattered our ancestors all across the globe, in every kingdom, in every country. Even to this day, you can go to any country and see us there. Excuse me. You can go to almost any country and see us there. Right. Speaking the language, born and raised there, etc., etc., etc. A prime example of that, Germany. We're out there in Germany. Russia. You can find us in Russia. You can find us in Asia. We're all across the globe. And a lot of those same Israelites that we're speaking of, they actually look like the nations around about them. Yeah. Yeah. So all those naysayers who are focused on skin color, you're wrong. It's not about skin color. It's about nationality and the lineage of your father. But, you know, the naysayers and scoffers, they stay stuck on one thing in all their ignorance. So, you know, they continue to scoff through lies and misinterpretation. But nonetheless, let's get back to the scriptures here. So we found out here in Deuteronomy 28:25, we'll be scattered in all nations. All nations, right? All nations of the earth and all kingdoms. So with that being said, we're going to skip over to Deuteronomy chapter 30 and stop here at verse 3. So there's going to come to a time when Yahweh is going to reverse the curses. So the curses are going to come off the Israelites and start affecting the other nations. Okay? As it reads here in Deuteronomy chapter 30. I mean, the whole chapter of Deuteronomy chapter 30 will really break that down. But we see here Yahweh says that then Yahweh the Elohim will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations whither the Yahweh the Elohim have scattered thee. So that would happen. That gathering will happen right before, you know, the kingdom of Elohim comes down to earth. Right? That's going to be the great gathering. But let's move forward here. So we got that understood. We got that understood. Let's go to Baruch. Baruch's going to explain some more of this here, of what we just read in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 3. We're going to go to Baruch chapter 4, starting at the top. This is the book of the commandments of Elohim, and the law that endureth forever. All they that keep it shall come to life, but such as leave it shall die. Turn thee, O Jacob, and take hold of it. Walk in the presence of the light thereof, that thou mayest be illuminated. Give not thine honor to another, nor the things that are profitable unto thee to a strange nation. What did that say? Give not thine honor to another, nor the things that are profitable unto thee to a strange nation. Give not thine honor to another, nor the things that are profitable unto thee to a strange nation. So all you naysayers out there, especially you particular Israelites that are offended because you see Mr. Idumea offended, what did that just say? What did the word of the Lord just say here? Concerning Jacob, concerning Israel. Give not thine honor to another, nor the things that are profitable unto thee to a strange nation. Verse 4, O Israel, happy are we, for things that are pleasing unto Elohim are made known unto us. Verse 5, be of good cheer, my people, the memorial of Israel. Ye were sold to the nations, not for your destruction, but because ye moved God to wrath. Ye were delivered unto the enemies. Not for our destruction, but for the wrath of Elohim, we were delivered unto the enemies. So that's why slavery happened. That's why slavery happened. That's why you have us under captivity in all these nations of the earth, even as we speak. Huh. Now, I'm going to stop right here, and we're going to continue on to part 4 in another video. Stay tuned. That's going to come up soon after this one. Shalom.